It's a cliche, but you only get to quality through quantity. Simple, but difficult to do because you're going to second guess the process. But somehow you got to move forward. You got to have faith that you'll figure it out along the way.
Hello there, and welcome to a special episode of the Royish Good Looks Podcast. I'm your host, Roy, and I recently sat down for a conversation with an old friend, TJ Foster. He interviewed me for a series called Confessions from the Underground, which you can read in the Metroland newspaper if you're in the Albany, New York area. It's an old school newspaper, literally paper, but I told TJ the conversation might actually make a fun podcast episode, and he was cool enough to let me record it and share some of the highlights with you today. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope you can hear both TJ and I smiling through the entire thing. It was a lot of fun, and if you can't tell, I was buzzing on a large coffee through the entire thing, but TJ asked a lot of great questions about going viral on YouTube, about dealing with perfectionism, and simply being an artist in the modern digital age. So it was right up my alley, and I found myself thinking about each question even after our conversation ended. It made me miss making my older, more reflective podcast episodes. It really felt like a therapy session for me more than anything. So TJ, thank you for letting me ramble while I was collecting my thoughts, and I'm sorry if my tangents were a pain to transcribe, but our conversation gave me a lot to think about, and I appreciate that. Also, we don't talk about it on air, but check out TJ's band, Eerie. The name is stylized E.R.I.E. They rock. I mean, listen to this. That's one of their new songs, Burnout. I'll link the band down in the description. Check them out. I think you'll enjoy them. And with all that said, here's our conversation.
What I wanted to talk to you about was basically this overarching idea of content. I think you're a master at what you do. Before we dive into that, I wanted to see if you could just tell our readers a little bit about what you do in that realm, because it's a lot, and I certainly don't want to be reductive. You've done parodies, you've done all sorts of different things. So just kind of explain that a little bit.
I appreciate that you put the immediate asterisk of I don't want to call you a parody artist. You think of someone like Weird Al, and you immediately think parodies, but he's also got originals, and he's also just a great musician and content creator in general. So I appreciate that. At the end of the day, I've been reflecting on this a lot more as time goes on, but it's just simply being an artist. I'm engineering, you're writing, you're recording, you're mixing, editing a video, you're posting it online, you're marketing. I don't do much live performance, but all of that, you're wearing 100 different hats, but you're really just an artist. And I don't know if that's pretentious to say. It sounds like you're being like a Stephen Jenkins or something. I'm the artist up here on stage. I've got something to say. But even within maybe that parody moniker, you're still making art. For me, that's the healthiest way to look at it and maybe describe it to somebody else too.
Yeah, no, and I think you touched on it really well too. It's you wear all those different hats, and it is truly being an artist in so many different ways. It's probably really nice too that you're able to you write a song, but then you can kind of, step away from that song a bit and apply it to, now I got to mix it. Now I got to make a video for it and this and that. So you kind of get those nice little segments in what you do. How long would you say each of these, I'm sure they vary, but how long would you say each of these videos takes you from point of inception to hitting publish?
Well, it kind of always varies, but I do keep track between my song releases. And so what I mean specifically is the Star Wars songs on the Royish Good Looks channel. And right now, I think the average is 50 days between one release to the next. And so those are all singles. And that's enough time to come up with the idea. And that day one, you get the most work done. You've got kind of the demo version of the song. And then you kind of tweak lyrics or you tweak the arrangement. But I have a hefty revision process of demo one is not at all what it ends up being in the final version. I'll redo the whole darn thing over the course of that 50 days. But within a week or two, you find what it's roughly going to be. And then the perfectionism kicks in. And it's just fine tweaking all half a dB up here. Or once it gets into the video stuff, I really take time to sync up the perfect frame with the beat of the song. and almost treat like the video editing just as you would the performance of the actual like music itself. And so again, there's a lot there. And I guess maybe that's why it takes, over a month for just one damn song. But I do procrastinate. I'm lazy just like everybody else. So it's not like a 40-hour work week on those sorts of things. But there's a lot of time in between like demo 1 to demo 2, demo 3, or like mix 1 to mix 2. And it's a very reiterative process for me.
That makes sense. Yeah. Your biggest video by far is obviously your Adele Star Wars matchup, which is still, it's almost 10 years old at this point.
It's 9 years old this year. Next year will be 10. Yeah.
Incredible. But millions of views on this thing. What was it about that one that you think made it so like successful? And when you made it, were you like, oh yeah, this is the thing, right?
When I made it, I was nervous to do anything with it. This is my origin story. I got over 70 singles, I think right now, about Star Wars. A couple of them are like Rick and Morty and other random stuff. Roughly Star Wars, but that was the first one. What made it so successful, dude, was it wasn't me being a genius. People like attribute that to me. Like you just said, you're a master of it. No, not really. That in particular was just the circumstance of Star Wars coming back after, last movie I think was like 2005. So it'd been 10 years since a new Star Wars movie. And Adele, Hello, was just huge. There was a million Adele parodies, but none of them paired Hello from the dark side in the lyric. I was lucky enough to be the only person that came up with that and put it out before somebody else had the opportunity. It was right time, right place, but just having done it. And after I'd made it, I showed it to my brother Russ. And I was like, what should I do with this? Should we put this out like under our band's name? We determined, no, we're not really like that kind of a group. Like we'll put out originals. We had done some covers and some silly stuff too. But the Star Wars thing is me. Russ isn't into Star Wars. So, or at least not to the level that I am. So he was like, this is cool. He actually sold me on it. I literally have a vivid memory of playing it for him and being like, what do you think? And he's just got this like eating grin on his face, like, play it again. I want to hear it again. And he didn't even like Star Wars. So like that told me something there. And he kind of gave me permission to just let it be my own thing. So that's why it made it out there with kind of like zero confidence. And then, the next week it blew up. So I could go down 100 other rabbit holes there, but I'll pause. I'll pause for audience reaction.
That's fair. Like it did blow up. It was like a huge thing. And I saw it kind of happening in real time, obviously, because knowing you. How did that feel? That must have been wild.
I have always loved YouTube, and I always wanted a video to hit 1 million views. That video might have been a viral hit, was not my first foray into silly YouTube videos. So I feel like I was kind of building up to that. I always wanted that. It felt very validating that you're like, sick, I did it. But I had no clue what to do next. This is the curse of like an overnight success. I don't really think it was truly overnight, but it was like a huge success. And I wasn't already in a routine of making parodies or even making my own music. The next thing I did musically was something back with my band. There wasn't even a continuation of that. I thought about how should I continue it. It was around Christmas time. I was like, I'll do Star Wars 12 Days of Christmas or something. I was like, no, that's too lame. I can't do that. I wound up doing nothing for the next like 9 months. I did nothing on that channel, at least related to Star Wars. I did some other covers in the meantime. It was just paralyzing. It was cool, but really confusing. And it took, another year or two to like figure out like what the heck Royish Good Looks was, when it really was just kind of a side project with no point. And over the last 9 years, it's obviously become very pointed.
That's actually a really good segue too, talking about that kind of paralyzing nature of these viral quote unquote things that happen. It's and these people that even just thinking on the music side, they'll get big success, big tours, whatever, from just like this single or clip that might have gone viral on like TikTok or something. Really diving deeper here, what I really wanted to know from you is like, do you feel like music or even just art in general, right, has been sort of diminished in any way by this constant like pressure to just pump out content?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think it's only diminished in the way that maybe like jaded old fogies like us might want to title our article that way, like art's going to be art. It's constantly changing. Like what is acceptable, the medium of which is acceptable, the style, all the artistic choices. So it's kind of BS to like judge it based on that. Like, oh, it's only a 15-minute TikTok. That's what music's been reduced to. Well, you've gone from the Gregorian chant to the symphony to the pop song to the TikTok video. Like, what do you expect? There not to be progress, especially when there's so many technological innovations, right? The algorithm is scary because then it does kind of become like a self-fulfilling kind of feedback loop where I almost would never have made Hello from the Dark Side, the Adele parody, if there weren't already Adele parodies on YouTube. I can literally point to the ones that I'm like, I saw that was amazing. Hello, the song is on the radio. Star Wars is everywhere. All those things, like that's an algorithm of itself that wound up creating my song.
It's like a vicious cycle with the algorithm. You wonder what and why it's feeding you the things it is. I am by no means on TikTok. I try to understand it, not even understand it from like a generational thing, like literally understand how to use it. I feel like it flips to me. I've talked to so many up and coming artists and they tell me the same thing. It's like, oh, I got started and noticed on TikTok. And so it is this blessing for these younger artists now that they're able to have this platform where anyone can hear their stuff, regardless of if they're touring or doing X, Y, and Z. So I do love that for them. But then it comes back to, for me, it's like, what happens to them in a year or two? To your point, you were like paralyzed, right? It almost like it can hinder the creative process, right? I imagine.
The pressure hinders the process because you can measure. Dude, you look at the YouTube analytics. It's insane what they can tell you about how something is performing good or bad. You know, how many likes, how many comments, how long is someone watching the video for, which is weird when that's a song. Are they even listening to the end of the song? You can see nobody listens to like the double chorus at the end, you know, or the fade out. No one listens to that. Literally, YouTube tells you. So that obviously, like a lot of pop songs cut off at the end. Whether you had that data or not, like people don't really listen to the end. This is no different though. Like the trying to play towards the algorithm. It's no different than if you're in a band and you're playing all the local clubs and you're hoping that you're going to get a record deal, right? I feel like if you want to tie this into more of our generation, you are looking for someone to just like pluck you out of your scene into the zeitgeist. And that's no different than people posting on Instagram or YouTube, TikTok, whatever. Like they're just, you know, throwing out their lures or casting, you know, trying to catch a fish, get their like, maybe not one hit wonder, but they're looking for that lottery ticket of some sort to get to the next level. And for the people that are doing it every day and they're building up a fan base, like that's the way to do it. Your local band that can bring 1,000 people to the show doesn't need a record label. They're already doing it. And those people happen to, you know, to get the offers sort of thing when they already know how to do it on their own. And that's still kind of similar, I feel, to the YouTube, to the algorithmic game. If you know how to show up every day, you're going to get better at your craft and you're going to increase the odds of getting lucky. If you stripped Hello from the Dark Side from my catalog, there might be a different amount of subscribers, a different view count for sure, but I'd still have 69 other songs and all the other skill gained from that. You know, we celebrate those huge wins, but it doesn't really mean anything. And again, I don't think it's easy for us, our generation, to be disconnected with TikTok. Like it's 15 minutes clips. It's weird. So I don't think that's really, I'm not going to be poignant enough to find the word for it, but it's not like a good or bad thing. It's just a different medium, but it's the same artistry at the end of the day.
You mentioned at one point a couple minutes ago, just kind of referencing, I think you used the adjective silly, right? In describing some of the things you do, right? And there is a sense of like silliness to it. It's entertainment. There's a lot of like nerd culture captured in. However, I was kind of going through your catalog and I saw the latest video you posted a couple weeks ago. And I saw this comment and I'm pulling it up right now just so I can read part of this to you. It says, you may know where this is going. You saw it. I know you responded to it, but it says, I'm Korean. The situations of the last few days in my country reminded me of the Emperor Palpatine and the Galactic Empire. Songs about rebellions give me strength. Thanks for making a good song. First of all, how awesome was that to read? And did you think that like some quote unquote silly thing that you worked on would have that kind of meaningful impact to a person on the other side of the world?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that you put the thing on the internet and it can reach anybody, you know, whether that's somebody in your neighborhood or across the world. When you think of the 22 million people or whatever that watch Hello from the Dark Side, like you're lucky if you're a local band, you can get 50 people to show up to your show, let alone 22 million people watched it. So you never know what kind of impact you're having on people. And I always try to respond to like those comments that feel like a real person at the other end. But on the silly note, for better or worse, I'm trying to be less silly and actually try to be that artist of like, I have something to say within the song. My recent obsession is to try and use Star Wars as an inspiration, but find the more universal theme within it. And if I could write the song without saying Emperor Palpatine or Jedi or the Force, you know, some like very Star Wars terminology, that you could almost hear the song and you could just say, oh, this just relates to me like any other song. This is a breakup song about, you know, your ex, but it still relates to me in my ex. For me, it's easy to do that as Star Wars is kind of like the spark. I get the idea from there and can distill it into something else. I'm just really into like philosophy and thinking about life in general. And there's so much with like being a Jedi that applies to. You're finding where you belong in the galaxy. You're learning these new strengths and you're passing on what you've learned to a younger generation. And so after 9 years of doing this, I got a really silly song about the Jar Jar Binks anthem. And it's just goofy, you know, goofy remix, whatever. But, you know, eventually you can find something that's maybe a little bit more powerful to say. You can have silly songs, you can have poignant songs. But yeah, I am trying to be a little bit more, find that balance in between the two. But yeah, I do love those comments when people say, hey, this just sounds like a real song. There's something really nice when you can find that sweet spot where this is not just a parody. This is not just a silly digital Dorito, I think is a term Cal Newport described to people scrolling through TikToks. I don't want to make digital Doritos, but I do like that you can be entertained, but that at the end of the day, there could be a little something more to return to. It's not just the spectacle.
I love that. Because I noticed that as well, where, you know, I put on that newer one, the Rebellion one, and I'm watching clips from Star Wars, but I'm not hearing specific references. It did come through that you've been doing that more and more. But again, I saw that comment and I was just like, wow, this was powerful, right? Like this guy on the other side of the world was clearly touched by what you did, and it meant something to them. You did touch on the other side of the spectrum, though, is like, what is the balance kind of between the comments like that and the comments that you just referenced about, oh, this sounds like a real song?
I think that is one of the like top comments. That's what you want to hear. It's just the way the person delivered that comment wasn't the right phrasing that would be as generous as you might like it to be. But that's the sentiment. That's the sentiment. I do think that they mean well by that, and that still feels good. And I get a chuckle out of it. I've read probably over 100,000 YouTube comments in my career. So I've seen the gamut of like awful to very generous. Anytime you can just laugh at it, regardless of what spectrum is on, is the healthier way to go about it.
So you're able to just kind of like, those bad ones are hilarious. You're just able to just be like,
no,
laugh at them.
No.
Okay.
I'll turn to my spouse and I'll be like, you believe what this person said? I'll still fume about it. But once that initial gut reaction kind of dissipates, then you can laugh, because YouTube comments are generally like fired off. Not a lot of people like write it, delete it, think about what they actually want to say, and then come back and revise. They are gut reaction. And there's always truth to that, but it doesn't always come out constructively is all.
Yeah. That's a very interesting side of this whole system of putting out content, right? Is that you're putting it out there for the masses to ingest, but you're also opening it up for comment and critique and discussion and this and that. And to your point, very few people are sitting there thinking about what they're writing. You spend an average of 50 days working on a song, they're going to listen to it for 90 seconds and then immediately fire off that gut reaction, right?
Dude, how much time do you have, TJ?
Got all the time in the world, man. Let's go.
The funny thing about that is like, and especially in like the Star Wars realm, but this is true with like Marvel and other properties, is when people say like, that was no good, they should have done this, they should have done that. You don't realize how much effort went into making it the way that it is. Songs are such a smaller thing to work out, but I'll still get comments that are like, you should have rhymed this with this. Well, okay. You could also write your own song if you've got a better idea. The people that say like, Taylor Swift, I could do what she does. Well, you didn't do it. You could have wrote Hello from the Dark Side. I didn't even write a verse. It just rhymes all the Star Wars names with O. It's not even a parody. It's just listing the names. So anybody could do this stuff. And it's also really easy to see what somebody else has done and critique it. It's really easy to revise something. That's why I do 100 revisions on my work. But there is no revision that then makes it infallible. That's not how art functions. So people that are commenting on YouTube or wherever, they just want to be heard and feel important. And that's the other kind of thing that's easy to forget when you're reading that comment. If someone's like, you suck and you should quit. This is what you get opened up to when you try to do something generous for the rest of the world. You get, useless comments like this. But you do have to remember that like there's just somebody else that wants to be heard. And in a weird way, that's also kind of satisfying that you could almost appreciate that. Like, glad you got that off of your chest.
Is there any part of this quote unquote content machine that you find particularly difficult or that you struggle with, whether it be any of the technical things or if it's literally just that hump, getting over that hump of saying, okay, this is ready to put out there? What do you find the most difficult or like the biggest speed bump?
There's a lot of speed bumps because I think deeply about every part of the process. How can I even just screen capture the video so that the pixels are a little bit sharper? That's one wrench in the puzzle. How can I warm up my voice so I don't sound too nasally on the recording? Like there's so many, like once you start spidering off, like how many different parts that you can like zone in on. What's the drum compression like? There's so many things. But yeah, the most difficult part is just simply feeling comfortable with what you've created at the end of the day. Okay, maybe it's a little nasally, but like it's cool. It's there. And that's the best I could do today. I might sound better tomorrow. Maybe if I did Hello from the Dark Side a day later, I'd sound better or I'd sound worse. It's just how you sound that day. Getting comfortable with that is difficult. But when you do, then you're able to actually put the thing out and, make progress in your own craft and also just like in society as well. You put the thing out and people can respond to it. It's no good if it's just living on your hard drive. And like I said, I'm into, a lot of self-help, self-development, philosophy stuff. I feel like that is the bigger thing. The drum compression, no one's ever complained about my drum compression. They complain about other superficial things, but like I obsess over that kind of thing. And a lot of other minute things that don't matter at the end of the day. What matters is that you put the darn thing out, and that is really the harder thing. How can I figure out what my process is, get comfortable with each step of it, and get to it a little sooner? This is kind of my New Year's resolution to get better at this because my average time is getting longer and longer between every song. Your ear gets more fine-tuned to these stupid things that nobody else cares about. That's just kind of the curse of being a craftsperson.
Yeah, for sure. I've struggled with that forever, and I've become more cognizant of it as I've kind of gotten older and been doing this longer, is just trying to find a way to be comfortable with exactly what you just said, right? Okay, my voice never sounds the way I want it to, but it particularly does not sound great today. Is that okay? That is human, right? We're not all going to be Taylor Swift or Mariah Carey at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, whatever, right? So it's like, it's one of those things you just kind of go over. It's a big mental speed bump for sure, right? You seem to have this very healthy balance of coming up with an idea, executing the idea no matter how long it takes, and then putting it out there and watch it just like organically do its thing. We were just talking about this kind of like self-help kind of thing, but how do you sort of maintain that in a healthy way in your mind?
Yeah. Well, I never work until 2 a.m. anymore. There'd be days of the studio, I'll be there all night. I know you got kids and a wife. There's responsibilities, whatever that may be, whether that's like actually showing up to an event or like you just got to do the dishes or whatever. There's something to just like, what are your normal human obligations that you need to consider that can actually maybe help keep your artistry on track? But when you make 70 Star Wars songs, you figure out a formula. I could tell you exactly step by step how I like to do it or how I usually do it. I teach recording courses. I work with beginning students that have not yet developed those muscles of like how they like their workflow from start to finish. They haven't done enough projects to have any clue. So that's also something you learn over time to know what the process is. Like I said, to reflect on where you're getting tripped up the most, not getting tripped up on the auto-tuning. I'm not getting tripped up on the drum compression. I'm getting tripped up on maybe other things, or maybe even just making revisions in general. Guess what, dude? Hello from the Dark Side, it's mix number 1. There was no revision. I think, to be fair, I made kind of like a demo version, but I did not, after talking to Russ, I did not go back to the studio and like tweak this or that. And that's not the case today. I tweak everything.
Looking back at that song, you said mix 1, right? And then you put it out there and you felt paralyzed for 9 months, whatever it was. Do you think that had some sort of impact on your process today? Now, like with your revising mixes more and more and more, right?
Yeah, I think I couldn't say otherwise because there's so much expectation after that song yeah, I still carry that expectation with me, which is why I try to be a Zen Buddhist and like not worry about the outcome. And that's what not everybody, but that's what a lot of people do when they're posting things, is they're hoping this will get enough clicks, enough likes, enough subscribes, enough views. And that sucks all the fun out of the process. Hello from the Dark Side was all fun. It was also like a 24-hour turnaround. It wasn't 50 days. I'm sure you probably listened to some of it, but like the Krista Makes a Podcast, where they interview songwriters.
Okay.
And it's a trope on the show that they're like, this song was written on the last day of our studio time, and we just kind of like fired it off, and that became the hit. It's painful how much like a true cliche that is. The ones I belabor over are not always the most successful, but I always learn something through those. I did a whole series. This was last year or the year before on my second channel, Royish Good Looks 2, where I had filmed every part of the process of recording a song about The Mandalorian, literally from like writing to recording to edit, everything. And I think that condensed the entire process down to like 10 hours of YouTube videos. So if you're really curious, you could see all the trials and tribulations. But yeah, you can see me like at every point, second guessing and hammering too hard away at things when like on day 3, the core song was there. I knew on that particular series that I was filming myself and people would watch it. So even that, there was another layer of like, oh, everyone's going to see how I'm doing it. So they need to see that I'm making it as good as possible. Nobody would have wanted to see Hello from the Dark Side because I just didn't care. There'd be no behind the scenes footage. It took no time to create. And that's not like the romantic image of the author. You know, it's like you're in the cabin in the woods for 6 months or whatever. I think the end user romanticizes that. And even us sometimes as the artist romanticizes that when it's really just like, hey, you got a good idea? What if you could just finish it at the end of the day and it's done, you know? And then you got 360 more days, 300 more ideas you could explore. You know, that's really simple, but it's not easy.
Do you think you'll ever just for like exercise purposes, try and do that again? Like say, okay, I'm going to just do this in 24 hours, see what happens and put it out there? Or is that just kind of not how your brain is working at this point?
That's kind of funny. I mean, that's what like demo 1 is. That's the most fun version of the project where there's no editing. You know, it's the show must go on. Like that's what you did today. But then the crafts person will say, well, this part's a little sharp, that's a little round, and then we can reconfigure it. And it's impossible to get rid of, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's not how anybody else consumes it. So yeah, if you could get yourself into that mindset, you could work faster. I can't. But it's interesting you ask, like, could you do that though? I do that on so many other things. Teaching my class, I got to prepare for it, but you can only teach it that one time that semester. And you got to wait until the next semester to revise it. And there's still a revision process, but that process is you get one chance a year on that one lecture. Or I do a podcast with my buddy Joey, Krypton to Alderaan, where we review the Star Wars shows. And that's off the cuff. It's just like this. You're just talking, and half an hour later, you've got the podcast. We edit out points of it, but it's done that day, basically. So there's other creative endeavors where I'm able to apply this advice, but not the place where it probably matters the most, right?
Yeah, well, that's good because it is, I feel anyway, it is two very different parts of your brain. Or maybe it's the same part of the brain, but two different factions of that side of the brain. Like I've always said, like I found myself as I've grown up working much better with deadlines. If I have something I'm working on that has no end goal in sight, I'll let it go forever, right? I mean, I've got stuff on my hard drive I've been sitting on for years because there's no like, you know, end goal in sight, right? But if it's something like, oh, I've got an article to write that needs to be done by, you know, tomorrow at midnight, I'm like, I'm in the zone, man. I'm just going and going. And it's just like you talked about. It's that different sort of mindset. You touched on something really subtly. Obviously, you're an artist. You're coming at it from that side of things. But flipping it on its head for a minute, from like a consumer standpoint, what are some things that you appreciate when you're like consuming content? Now, it could be arts, whatever, but things in your feed, whatever the case may be, when you're looking for stuff like that, when you're seeking it out, what are some things you appreciate and what are some things that drive you crazy?
I love when things are formatted really well, whether that's a pop song, whether that's a movie, YouTube video, whatever it is, where you're like, I get it. It seems like somebody thought about how to present this particular thing in the most satisfying way. It can work for songs, it could work for movies, it could work for books. I love books that just get to the point. I don't need an introduction, just like get to the goods. You can apply that obviously to pop songs too. You start with, great hook, whether that's lyrics, melody, or musical. So I love great formatting in general and succinct formatting. And I hate when people ignore that. When you make a podcast, you got to edit out the empty space, edit out the ums and the ahs and the cracking of beer, as you're just chilling and having a good time, and think about the end user. And maybe that's why I belabor over some of my content, because partially it's for me. Demo 1, I'll listen to Demo 1 100 times, man. I don't need to actually finish it. I'm happy personally with that first version, but to put it out, it's got to be better than that. It's got to be as good as it can be. This has to be worthy of 1 million views. And so particularly with podcasts, because I personally believe podcasts are the 21st century garage band. Everyone's got one. Not everybody knows how to play their scales. Not everybody knows how to, write a good song structure. And people forget that, they're going to tune out if it's not well formatted. And I think that the same is true in almost every art form, other than maybe still image, where you can look at a painting. That's maybe the only other asterisk here. Everything else that you're consuming over time, if you lose your attention in it, you disengage. That's sad if it's subtlety. You have to stick around. You got to wait until the last chorus. That's the payoff. Why does it build so slow? But you got Phil Collins. You're waiting for that one moment. You have to have a lot of patience. That's a really boring song.
Yeah, it is.
But it pays off. And that's not how the zeitgeist kind of works nowadays, but that's still something to think about, If that song was made today, it might kind of open up with that, or that would be at the first chorus, not the third chorus or whatever that is in the song. So formatting, I think, is really important. And that can kind of hack the rest of the process, because then you know what you're shooting for. Star Wars, right? The hero's journey. That's clear process of how you're going to hit all those story beats in 3 acts. This is a big gripe with these Star Wars shows, because they don't have a clear format in a lot of the series. The range of episode times go from 61 minutes to 31 minutes. The episodes are any length of time. The formatting is weird episode to episode. Not that that's good or bad, but it's just different every time. And that confuses me as an end user. So a little bit of a diatribe there, but yeah, formatting to consider the consumer.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I think it's how your brain works too. Again, to your point, if you're sitting down expecting to watch an hour-long show and an episode comes up that's 30 minutes, wait, what the hell? What just happened? It's certainly not, but it's not exclusive to Star Wars. It's everything nowadays. In some ways, it's nice. I'm flipping it back again from an artistic standpoint. It's nice that these writers have more freedom to tell their stories how they want it to be told. But again, to your point, from a consumer standpoint, you're kind of sitting there wait a minute, that was much shorter than the previous episode. Why was that? Makes no sense, right? On the other hand, I loved the last season of Stranger Things. Those last couple episodes were movie length.
Yeah.
I was I could sit here all day and watch this. It was excellent. Right. So funny you say that.
Well, and it works both ways. It could be too short, it could be too long, it could be just short enough. I'm not sure if this is where the line came from, but I think I read this in several short sentences about writing. It's how long is a good idea? You could belabor the point, or you could get to it. Both could work, but either way, an end user is expecting something, whether you want it to be the epic length. I love the Lord of the Rings, extended director cut edition that my girlfriend will never, ever watch with me. But some people prefer that theatrical cut that takes out all the fluff.
Yeah. That's funny. That's my wife and I, except my wife is on your side of that token for the Lord of the Rings. All right, I got one more. I always like to end these sort of conversations trying to kind of leave readers with a little nugget of wisdom, right? You kind of excel at all these different things, right? From songwriting to performing to recording to video editing, and even I would argue to marketing, right? You're putting your stuff out there and you're promoting it in a big way. I wanted to end by kind of addressing the folks, no matter what level they're at in their careers, what age they are, what they're doing, but they may only excel at one of these things, but they still want to generate content, generate things rapidly, and most importantly, effectively. Loaded question. What advice would you give these people to be successful at this?
Well, I mean, it's a cliche, but you only get to quality through quantity. Simple, but difficult to do, because you're going to second guess the process. But if you can find a bulwark of, you just show up to your studio, you hit record, and then you post. Like you said, you have to write your article. You've got a deadline. There has to be some sort of adult in the process. Like you mentioned something like this of like, yeah, it's like there's stuff on the hard drive and it's just like there's no plan, So what is the plan? You're not going to have all of the skill that you wish you'll ever have right away. You're going to have to build up to that. And you're not going to know all the steps in the process. It's Steve Jobs. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. But somehow you got to move forward. You got to have faith, hope that you'll figure it out along the way. If you do want to be an artist, they're always wrestling with that uncertainty. That's what makes it fun. What happens if I do this in the mix? Or what happens when I go to this chord? Or what happens when I hit publish on this thing? What happens? If you want to like gamify it, just make it an experiment.
I love that. Yeah, that's excellent. This is awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Dude, this was so much fun, man. I could literally talk to you all day. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, same, dude.